Hey everyone! Before we dive into a story that will send shivers down your spine and leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the darkness lurking in the human heart, I have a small favor to ask. If you're new to the channel, or even if you've been here before but haven't hit that button yet, please consider subscribing. Your support means the world to me and helps me bring more gripping narratives like this one to life. Just a quick click, and you'll be part of a community that loves exploring the thrilling, the mysterious, and sometimes the truly terrifying. Now, with that out of the way, prepare yourselves. What you are about to read is a work of fiction, but it delves into the darkest corners of human depravity. It's a story that will unfold across 3 chapters, each meticulously crafted to build tension, reveal chilling details, and ultimately, expose the horrifying truth behind a series of murders that shook America to its core. This isn't just a tale of violence. It's a deep dive into the ripple effects of unimaginable evil, the relentless pursuit of justice, and the indelible scars left on a nation. So, dim the lights, silence your notifications, and brace yourself. The story of the Obsidian Reaper begins now. The air in Blackwood Creek, Montana, usually carried the sweet scent of pine and damp earth, a comforting aroma that spoke of untouched wilderness and serene solitude. On the morning of October 17th, however, it was tainted. A metallic tang, unmistakable and chilling, hung heavy, carried on a breeze that felt unnaturally cold for mid-autumn. Deputy Sheriff Ben Carter, a man whose 45 years had been mostly spent navigating the quiet rhythms of rural law enforcement, knew instantly that something was terribly wrong. He'd seen enough deer butchered and enough farm accidents to recognize the scent of fresh blood. But this was different. This was human. His patrol car, a Ford Explorer that had seen better days and countless miles of unpaved roads, crunched to a halt beside the hastily erected yellow tape. The crime scene was a familiar one in its setting, a remote hiking trail that wound deep into the Lolo National Forest but utterly alien in its horror. Sergeant Miller, a grizzled veteran whose face seemed permanently etched with the weariness of 1,000 small-town dramas, met Ben with a grim shake of his head. Miller hadn't even needed to say a word. The look in his eyes, a mixture of shock and profound sadness, spoke volumes. The victim was a young woman, or rather what was left of her. Her name, they would later learn, was Eleanor Vance, a 23-year-old aspiring photographer who had recently moved to Blackwood Creek from Seattle, drawn by the promise of untouched landscapes and a simpler life. Now, her life was brutally and irrevocably over, laid bare on a canvas of fallen leaves and damp moss. Her body had been meticulously arranged, almost posed, amidst a clearing a quarter-mile off the main trail, as if the killer wanted her to be discovered, but on his terms. The initial shock of the discovery was quickly replaced by a cold, analytical dread that settled deep in Ben's gut. This wasn't a random act of violence, a robbery gone wrong, or a crime of passion. The meticulousness, the almost artistic display of her broken form, screamed of something far more sinister, something premeditated and deeply disturbed. Eleanor's clothing was neatly folded beside her, not torn or ripped, suggesting she had been cooperative, or perhaps incapacitated before the final act. There were no signs of a struggle. Her personal belongings, a backpack, a camera, a water bottle, were placed in a neat pile several feet away, untouched. Nothing had been stolen. The motive was not material gain. The cause of death was a single, precise stab wound to the heart, delivered with such force and accuracy that it indicated a chilling familiarity with human anatomy. But it was the other details that truly twisted Ben's stomach into knots. Carved into the bark of a towering ponderosa pine directly above Eleanor's body was a symbol, a jagged, obsidian-like shard, almost like a stylized arrowhead, pointing downwards. It was crude, yet somehow menacing, alien to anything Ben had ever seen in the decades he'd spent policing these quiet mountains. The FBI was called in within hours. Special Agent Sarah Jennings, a sharp, no-nonsense profiler from the Violent Crimes Unit, arrived by early afternoon, her crisp suit and focused demeanor a stark contrast to the rugged wilderness. She moved with an efficiency that bordered on surgical, her eyes missing nothing, her questions cutting straight to the core. Ben, along with Miller and the small team of local deputies, found themselves overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the investigation. Suddenly thrust into a world of psychological profiling and forensic intricacies they were ill-equipped to handle. Sarah's initial assessment was grim. "This isn't his first time," she stated, her voice calm but firm, as she knelt beside Eleanor's body, her gloved hands pointing out details Ben had overlooked. The precision, the ritualistic arrangement, the signature. This is the work of a highly organized, intelligent individual. He's comfortable with death. He's done this before somewhere else. And he'll do it again. The word signature echoed in Ben's mind. The symbol on the tree. It was the killer's calling card, his declaration. He wanted to be known. He wanted to be feared. The thought sent a shiver down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold mountain air. For the next 2 weeks, Blackwood Creek became a hive of activity, swarming with federal agents, forensic experts, and media vans. The quiet town, usually a haven for tourists seeking solitude, was suddenly under a harsh, unwelcome spotlight. Residents, once trusting and open, now looked at each other with suspicion, their eyes darting nervously whenever a stranger passed. The idyllic bubble had burst. The initial investigation yielded frustratingly little. No witnesses. No DNA. The killer had been meticulous, leaving no trace. No surveillance footage. The remote location offered no cameras. The only lead was the mysterious symbol, which Sarah's team cross-referenced with every unsolved murder in the national database. Nothing matched. It was unique, or at least uniquely applied here. Ben found himself working around the clock, fueled by lukewarm coffee and a growing sense of helplessness. He knew everyone in Blackwood Creek, every family, every eccentric recluse, every seasonal worker. The idea that one of his people could be capable of such depravity was anathema. Yet, Sarah's profile suggested the killer was likely a local, or someone intimately familiar with the area, someone who knew the trails, the hidden clearings, the rhythms of the small town. He wasn't a transient passing through, he was embedded. Then, 3 weeks after Eleanor Vance's murder, the second body was found. This time, it wasn't in Blackwood Creek. It was in Flathead Lake, nearly 100 miles north, in the affluent resort town of Polson. The victim, 30-year-old Mark Jensen, a successful real estate agent on vacation from California. His body was discovered by a morning jogger on a secluded stretch of beach. The scene was eerily similar, yet subtly different. Mark Jensen's body was also meticulously arranged, fully clothed, without signs of struggle. Cause of death: a single, precise stab wound to the heart, and carved into a nearby driftwood log, stark against the weathered wood, was the same obsidian shard symbol. The signature, the shift in location, the difference in victim demographics: a young woman from a small town, a successful man from a city, threw a wrench into the early profiling. The killer wasn't targeting a specific type of person or locale. He was targeting opportunity. Or perhaps, there was a deeper, more abstract pattern at play that they couldn't yet discern. The media, already captivated by the Montana wilderness killer, exploded. National news channels ran hourly segments, sensationalizing every detail, speculating wildly. The murders were deemed ritualistic, satanic, and the work of a madman. The fear spread like wildfire, not just across Montana, but across the entire Pacific Northwest. Tourist bookings plummeted. Locals barricaded their doors. Sarah Jennings, however, remained steadfast, her focus unwavering. "He's escalating," she told Ben and the other agents during a tense briefing. Her finger traced a line between the 2 murder sites on a large map. "The distance is significant. It shows he's mobile but not random. He's establishing a pattern of movement, creating a larger territory. He's confident. He's enjoying the hunt." Her gaze swept over the room, meeting each anxious eye. "And the signature is more than just a calling card. It's a statement. He wants us to see it. He wants us to know he's there. And he wants us to feel helpless." Ben felt exactly that. Helpless. He had dedicated his life to protecting the peace of Blackwood Creek. And now, a monster was stalking its shadows. a ghost that left no trace but an unsettling symbol and a trail of unimaginable grief. The weight of it pressed down on him, a heavy, suffocating blanket of dread. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The whisper of darkness had turned into a chilling roar, and it was echoing across America. The Obsidian Reaper, as the media had dubbed him, was just getting started, and the nation was holding its breath, waiting for his next move. The horror had begun its inexorable march. The Obsidian Reaper's macabre tour of the American West continued with a terrifying, almost artistic precision. Just as the initial panic in Montana began to recede into a simmering anxiety, a new wave of terror crashed down, this time in the verdant, rugged landscape of Olympic National Park, Washington. The third victim, 38-year-old Dr. Alistair Finch, a renowned botanist from the University of Washington, was discovered a month after Mark Jensen, meticulously posed near the Hoh Rainforest's iconic Hall of Mosses. Like the others, he was found fully clothed, no signs of struggle, and with a single, precise stab wound to the heart. And, like the others, the chilling obsidian shard symbol was carved into a towering Sitka spruce nearby. The nation was now gripped by a collective horror. The term serial killer was whispered in hushed tones, then shouted by pundits on cable news. The FBI, under immense public and political pressure, escalated the investigation to the highest priority, establishing a multi-agency task force codenamed Operation Obsidian. Special Agent Sarah Jennings, now a national figure, found herself at the helm, coordinating efforts across multiple states. Her face, usually composed, now carried the heavy burden of the mounting casualties and the elusive nature of their predator. Ben Carter, despite the distance, remained intrinsically linked to the case. Eleanor Vance's murder in Blackwood Creek had been the start, the first ripple in a pond that was now a raging ocean. Sarah kept him updated, recognizing his local knowledge and persistent dedication, a quality she valued in the often chaotic world of federal investigations. Ben, meanwhile, felt a burning need to see justice for Eleanor, a silent promise he made to her memory. He haunted the edges of the active investigation, sifting through old reports, revisiting every lead, however small, from those initial, frantic days. The pattern, though still frustratingly broad, was solidifying. The victims were diverse in age, gender, and background, but shared a common thread. They were all in remote, natural settings, often alone, and appeared to be enjoying the solitude of nature. The locations, while geographically spread, were all iconic natural landmarks, almost as if the killer was making a twisted statement about his dominion over these untouched spaces. The distances between the murders, growing progressively further, suggested a killer on a deliberate, if slow, journey. He's not just moving, he's expanding his territory, challenging us, Sarah explained during a teleconference with the sprawling task force. Her voice, amplified through the speakers, filled conference rooms in Seattle, Helena, and Washington, D.C. He's testing his limits, pushing the boundaries of what he can achieve without being caught. Each kill is an experiment, a refinement. The profiling of the Obsidian Reaper grew increasingly complex. He was highly intelligent, meticulous, and patient. He meticulously cleaned the crime scenes, leaving no forensic evidence. He seemed to understand human behavior and environmental conditions, choosing isolated locations where witnesses were scarce and evidence was easily dispersed by nature. His method of killing, a single, precise stab to the heart, indicated a chilling calm and a disturbing intimacy with the act itself. He wasn't a frenzied killer. He was a cold, calculating predator. Psychologists brought in to assist the FBI offered various theories. Some suggested a deep-seated contempt for humanity, a desire to cleanse the natural world of its human intruders. Others speculated about a messianic complex, believing the killer saw himself as a chosen agent of some higher, darker power. The obsidian shard symbol became a central focus of their analysis, a key to unlocking the killer's disturbed psyche. Was it a cult symbol? Personal sigil? A taunt? The public, however, didn't care for academic theories. They wanted answers. They wanted safety. The fear mutated into anger, directed at law enforcement for their apparent inability to catch the monster. Every isolated park, every hiking trail, every quiet, scenic overlook became a potential hunting ground. America, once a land of open spaces and boundless freedom, suddenly felt small, constrained by the shadow of a killer. Then came the fourth victim 3 months after Dr. Finch. This time, the location was even more audacious: Yosemite National Park, California. The victim, 50-year-old Eleanor Ellie Roth, a renowned birdwatcher and retired schoolteacher from San Francisco, found near the base of El Capitan. The scene was a haunting echo of the previous murders. The single, precise stab wound, the meticulous arrangement, the obsidian shard carved into a granite slab, almost defying the unyielding rock. The move to California, the most populous state, a place teeming with tourists and locals alike, sent shockwaves through the nation. It was a brazen act, a clear message. He could strike anywhere, anytime. The media dubbed him the Ghost Killer, highlighting his uncanny ability to vanish without a trace. With each new murder, the pressure on Sarah and Operation Obsidian intensified. Leads poured in from across the country, a deluge of false sightings, crackpot theories, and genuine, but ultimately unhelpful, tips. Every man fitting a vague profile became a suspect. Every car, every unusual sound, every shadow became a source of paranoia. Ben, reviewing the original evidence from Eleanor Vance's murder for the 100th time, felt a sudden jolt. He was looking at the photo of the obsidian symbol carved into the ponderosa pine. He'd seen thousands of trees in his life, knew their bark, their textures. But something about this image, the cut, it was deep, deliberate, but not smooth. It had a rough, almost fragmented edge. He compared it to the photos from the other crime scenes. The symbol was identical, but the method of carving seemed to evolve slightly, becoming cleaner, more confident over time. He called Sarah immediately. "The carvings, Sarah," he said, his voice urgent. "Are they all identical in their execution, or just in their design?" Sarah paused, considering. "The design is identical. The angle, the dimensions. It's remarkably consistent." "Why do you ask?" "Look closer at the actual cut marks, the edges," Ben pressed. "Especially the first one, Eleanor Vance's. The wood seems splintered, like it was done with something that wasn't perfectly sharp, or perhaps with less practiced hands. The later ones, they look almost professional, clean. Could it be a sign of development? Of the killer becoming more adept at his craft?" There was a moment of silence on the line. Then, Sarah's voice, sharper, more alert. "Ben, that's an excellent observation. We focus so heavily on the symbol itself, the meaning. We assumed consistency in execution. But you're right. If he's learning, evolving, that speaks volumes about his psychological state. It suggests he's not just repeating a ritual. He's perfecting it." This tiny detail, almost missed in the overwhelming flow of data, was a glimmer of hope. It suggested a learning curve, a human element, however twisted. It meant the killer wasn't some static, unchangeable force. He was adapting, improving. And if he was adapting, he was vulnerable. The profiling was updated. The killer was not merely intelligent. He was a meticulous planner, a quick learner, and highly adaptable. He was driven by a powerful internal compulsion, but also by a desire for mastery. He was obsessed with the act itself, with the process, with the perfect execution of his twisted vision. The escalating geographical reach was not just about challenging law enforcement. It was about expanding his own canvas, seeking new and increasingly complex backdrops for his gruesome art. Sarah flew Ben to the FBI's command center in Quantico, Virginia, a few weeks later. She wanted his insights, his grounded perspective, his intimate knowledge of the first crime scene. Ben found himself in a world far removed from the quiet forests of Montana, surrounded by screens displaying maps, timelines, and profiles, each illuminated face in the room carrying the weight of the investigation. During one late-night session, poring over satellite imagery of the various crime scenes, Ben noticed something else. All the locations, while remote, were accessible by vehicle within a reasonable distance of a major highway or a well-maintained road. The killer wasn't hiking miles into the wilderness. He was driving, parking, and then walking to a chosen spot. This suggested he likely had a vehicle that blended in, something unremarkable. He's using the wilderness as a stage, but he's not living in it, Ben pointed out, tracing a finger along a faded road on a map of Yosemite. He's coming and going. He's not a hermit. He's blending into society. The task force focused on this new direction. They began to cross-reference vehicle sightings in the vicinity of the crime scenes, looking for anything consistent, anything out of place yet unremarkable. The haystack was enormous, but the search had gained a new vector. The fifth murder came 6 months after Yosemite, just as the public's heightened alert began to wane, replaced by a weary resignation. This time it was Big Bend National Park, Texas. The victim, 62-year-old Father Michael O'Connell, a Catholic priest on a spiritual retreat. His body was found in a remote, arid canyon, a desolate yet stunning backdrop. The familiar ritual, the precise wound, the obsidian shard carved into a sun-baked rock. This was a chilling escalation. The distance from California to Texas was immense, traversing multiple states. The killer was now operating on a truly national scale. The geographical spread was no longer just the Pacific Northwest. It was the entire American West. And the victim selection seemed utterly random, yet meticulously chosen. A young photographer, a real estate agent, a botanist, a birdwatcher, a priest. What tied them together? Was it their pursuit of nature, their solitary moments of reflection? The media, now desperate for a moniker that captured the scale of the horror, christened him the American Nomad, a phantom moving across the vast landscape, leaving a trail of blood and despair. The FBI, however, had another name for him, a name born of their growing understanding of his dark art, the Obsidian Reaper. He wasn't just killing. He was harvesting souls and marking his territory with the grim symbol of his craft. The fear in America was palpable, a low hum beneath the surface of everyday life. People stayed indoors, avoided national parks, looked at strangers with suspicion. The sense of security of being safe in one's own country was eroding. The Obsidian Reaper wasn't just taking lives. He was stealing a sense of peace, leaving an entire nation looking over its shoulder, waiting for the next whisper of darkness to turn into a terrifying roar. The gyre was widening, and no one knew where it would end. The hunt was on, but the hunter remained frustratingly, chillingly invisible. The hunt for the Obsidian Reaper had become a national obsession, a relentless, multi-pronged effort involving thousands of law enforcement personnel across the United States. Following the Big Bend murder, Special Agent Sarah Jennings and the Operation Obsidian Task Force refined their strategy. The learning curve in the carvings, first noted by Ben Carter, became a critical piece of the puzzle. It suggested not a seasoned, lifelong killer, but someone who had begun his reign of terror recently, perhaps within the last year, and was rapidly perfecting his method. This drastically narrowed the timeline for potential early indicators. The geographical spread, while vast, began to reveal a subtle pattern. Each murder site was not just remote. It was accessible within a day's drive of a major interstate, suggesting the killer had a base of operations, or at least a regular route, that allowed him to strike and then disappear into the anonymity of America's vast highway system. They began to cross-reference unusual vehicular activity along these interstates during the approximate times of the murders, searching for anything consistent. The profilers, now working with an even deeper understanding of the killer's psychology, theorized he was driven by a need for control and recognition, manifesting in the meticulous nature of the killings and the signature symbol. He wasn't just a killer, he was an artist, a performer on a stage of his own twisted making. The victims, diverse as they were, shared a common thread. They were all individuals seeking solace or inspiration in nature, moments of peaceful solitude that the Reaper brutally violated. He was targeting their vulnerability, their trust in the serenity of the wilderness. 6 months after Big Bend, the sixth murder occurred. The location was Acadia National Park, Maine. The victim, a 35-year-old park ranger, Robert "Robbie" Davis, found near the iconic Cadillac Mountain. The East Coast strike was a brutal declaration, shattering any lingering hope that the killer's territory was confined to the West. The Obsidian Reaper had truly become the American nomad, traversing the entire continent, proving his reach was boundless. The modus operandi was identical. Precise stab to the heart, meticulous arrangement, and the obsidian shard carved into a granite outcrop overlooking the rugged Atlantic coast. The nation was in uproar. Public trust in law enforcement plummeted. Calls for the killer to be apprehended intensified, reaching a fever pitch. Sarah Jennings, now a household name synonymous with the investigation, faced relentless media scrutiny and political pressure. But amidst the chaos, a crucial break was made, thanks to a combination of painstaking old-fashioned police work and cutting-edge technology. A small, nondescript blue Ford pickup truck, vintage 2005, had been flagged by an automated license plate reader, ALPR, system at a toll booth just outside Glacier National Park, Montana, 3 days before Eleanor Vance's murder in Blackwood Creek. It was an anomaly. The truck had been registered to an address in rural Idaho, a state not known for its frequent travelers to Glacier. More importantly, the same truck had been captured by another ALPR system crossing into Washington state just days before Dr. Alastair Finch's murder, and then, inexplicably, later detected near Yosemite. The license plate was scanned in a handful of key locations within the general vicinity of every single crime scene, always within a critical window before or after the murders. It wasn't a perfect, continuous trail, but it was enough. The sheer improbability of one obscure vehicle appearing at so many disparate, remote locations, each linked to a brutal murder, was too great to ignore. The owner of the truck, a man named Arthur Jenkins, became the prime suspect. Arthur Jenkins was 47 years old, a solitary figure who worked as a freelance wilderness guide and occasionally as a long-haul truck driver. His official residence was a dilapidated cabin nestled deep in the Idaho Panhandle, an area known for its rugged individualism and sparse population. He had no criminal record, no history of violence, and a reclusive lifestyle that made him almost invisible. He was the ghost. Sarah Jennings, along with a heavily armed tactical team, moved swiftly and silently. They tracked Jenkins to a remote campsite near the Salmon River in Idaho, a place he frequented during his guiding periods. The arrest was uneventful. Jenkins, surprised in his sleep, offered no resistance. He simply looked at Sarah with an expression that was not fear, but a strange, unsettling mixture of resignation and a fleeting, almost imperceptible spark of pride. The cabin in Idaho was a trove of chilling evidence. Inside, amidst an otherwise unremarkable collection of outdoor gear and survival manuals, they found a meticulously organized trophy room. Tacked to a corkboard were newspaper clippings, printed articles, and hand-drawn maps of every murder site, each marked with a small, hand-carved obsidian shard. There were photographs of his victims, often taken from a distance before the act, along with more intimate post-mortem photographs carefully arranged. A leather-bound journal, filled with cryptic entries and detailed observations about human nature, nature's indifference, and his own self-proclaimed mission, was discovered beneath a loose floorboard. The journal was the key to his twisted psyche. Jenkins wrote about a deep-seated contempt for humanity's destructive impact on nature, a belief that he was an instrument of the earth itself, cleansing it of those he deemed unworthy, those who merely used nature for their own pleasure without truly respecting its power. He saw his victims as sacrifices, offerings to a higher, darker entity he called the primordial void, symbolized by the obsidian shard. Each kill was a ritual, a step in his grand, horrifying vision. The learning curve in the carvings was indeed a mark of his apprenticeship, his journey towards mastering his dark art. The unmasking of Arthur Jenkins, the Obsidian Reaper, sent shockwaves across the nation, bringing both immense relief and a profound sense of despair. Relief that the monster was caught, despair at the utter depravity and senselessness of his crimes. The subsequent trial was a media circus, lasting months, captivating the entire country. Jenkins, surprisingly articulate, used the courtroom as a platform to expound upon his twisted ideology, chilling the public with his lack of remorse and his fervent belief in his own righteousness. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, but the meticulously planned nature of his crimes and the chilling coherence of his journal entries ultimately led to his conviction. Arthur Jenkins was sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms without parole, ensuring he would spend the rest of his days in a maximum security prison. The verdict brought closure for the victims' families, but the scars on the nation remained. The Obsidian Reaper had not just murdered individuals. He had shattered a sense of security, tarnished the beauty of America's wilderness, and left an indelible mark on the collective psyche. Ben Carter returned to Blackwood Creek, forever changed. The quiet rhythms of his small town now carried a faint, unsettling echo of the darkness that had once resided there. He continued his patrols, but his eyes were sharper, his awareness heightened. He knew, intimately, that evil could wear the most unassuming face, and that the wild, beautiful places he loved could also harbor the deepest horrors. He carried the memory of Eleanor Vance, and the others, a silent reminder of the fragility of life and the relentless vigilance required to protect it. Sarah Jennings, hailed as a national hero, continued her work with the FBI, forever haunted by the chilling words in Jenkins's journal and the vacant, proud look in his eyes during the trial. She understood that catching one monster didn't eradicate the darkness, but it did, for a time, bring light to the shadows. Years passed. The fear of the Obsidian Reaper faded into a grim historical footnote, but the echoes of his crimes lingered. National parks implemented new safety measures, surveillance was subtly increased in remote areas, and the public, though slowly returning to the embrace of nature, carried a newfound caution. The story of Arthur Jenkins, the American nomad, the Obsidian Reaper, became a cautionary tale, a chilling reminder that true horror often resides not in the supernatural, but in the depths of the human heart, capable of manifesting unspeakable evil under the most serene of skies. His symbol, the jagged obsidian shard, faded from public consciousness but remained a stark, silent warning for those who sought to understand the true cost of unchecked malevolence. The memory of the Reign of Terror, a dark stain on the fabric of American history, served as a perpetual reminder of the vigilance required to protect the innocent from the silent, patient predators who walk among us. The scars were permanent, etched into the landscape and the souls of a nation.